Hi everyone, my name is Z, and this is my final presentation for Education 10. And my presentation today will be on SRUNR. So, what is SRUNR? Well, SRUNR is a structured reading strategy adapted from SQ3R. And since it's adapted from SQ3R, SRUNR is designed to reduce the feeling of being overwhelmed while it increases your comprehension of the readings and materials. And how it does that is essentially SRUNR revolves around active processing and a lot of repetition. And we'll talk about how it revolves around a lot of repetition later. And SRUNR also works best for difficult, dense, or technical readings. So I like to use them for things like research papers. So now you might be questioning, what are the steps to SRUNR? Well, the step one is to survey. And essentially, the survey step is the same as all the other ones, kind of, where you just do a quick 2 to 5 minute skim, look at the titles, look at the headings to just get a general sense and feel of what you're about to read. Step two is to actually read. But I do want to note that you only really want to read in small sections, preferably paragraphs. And when you read, you don't really want to note take. You kind of just want to write the headings down. And this helps you get the flow and the big ideas. Step three is underline and or highlight. So essentially, after you read your section, which is about that paragraph, you want to go back, identify the key ideas, highlight and underline what you need. But just like we learned in class, you kind of want to avoid over highlighting. And this takes us a step forward, where after you underline and highlight, you go back, summarize what you highlighted and underlined, and then you take notes on that. And there's really no real like suggested ways besides for just using short phrases in your own words, and you just rinse and repeat this. Now, after you've rinsed and repeated for the whole material, you go back, review again, reread your notes and your highlights and your underlines. And then this is also another chance for you to answer end of the chapter questions or self-created questions. And essentially every step here essentially reinforces repetition. And that's what this is really based off of. So again, why does it work? Well, based off Van Blerkum, his quote is actually, you actually get more repetition on the important information with SRUNR than any other reading slash studying systems. So this is based off like research and it's backed, right? And we know it's based off repetition. So how is it actually based off repetition? Well, it strengthens learning by guiding you to identify all the key ideas, right? But it gives you repeated exposure to those key ideas and the materials at every step. And essentially, that also improves comprehension of the material because you're working in these super small focused chunks, so you're not overwhelmed and you only need to look at the small chunks. And since you're doing all this and you're working in small chunks and you are making these underlines and highlights and notes, it's super fast and efficient for you to go back and review these notes later that you took. And this is essentially a summary of what Van Vlerkum had to say. So, when did I apply SRUNR? Well, for my political science 143 week 8 readings, I applied it. So for this assignment, I had to read two separate 30-page research articles, and research articles are those very dense technical readings, right? And I needed strong comprehension and retention of what was mentioned in these articles because I knew I had an upcoming in-class quiz. So this is why I chose SRUNR because it would help me get the comprehension and information and repetition. But most importantly, I know I'm a repetition-based learner. So what were the outcomes? Well, when I used SRUNR for that week 8 reading quiz, I scored a 10 out of 10, and I also scored a 10 out of 10 on my week 9 reading quiz. But when I hadn't used SRUNR, my highest score was a 9 out of 10, and my average before then was an 8 out of 10. So this kind of comes down to evaluation, right? I believe that this strategy is very efficient for me because I'm a learn by doing and repetition-based learner. Once again, SRUNR is built for repetition-based learners. And that goes to the second bullet, right? It fits me well because it gets me the most repetition out of anything. And I also do read a lot of research articles for my on-campus job, so it works it for me, right? I have to read these long, dense readings. Why not use the reading strategy built for long, dense readings? Now, I do have some suggestions. So for people that don't really enjoy reading, because even though you are breaking it down and you're less overwhelmed, you're mainly going to use this for long readings, right? I suggest that you can adapt the highlighting and note-taking steps to be more time efficient, or you can just use a strategy like P2R. Like at the end of the day, it all comes down to your personal preference and needs for what you want to get out of your reading strategy. This is the works cited, and then that's the presentation.